I've basically blown through my life savings. I'm living like paycheck to paycheck. It's enough to cover some bills, but sometimes it's not enough to cover all of them. That is a direct quote from a participant in a recent Federal Reserve Worker Perspectives report, and it perfectly captures the visceral, everyday reality for millions of Americans who are currently living entirely in survival mode.
So in this explainer, we're going to look completely past all the usual political rhetoric. Instead, we're relying strictly on official data to really understand the complex web of structural poverty and economic stagnation here in the United States. We're pulling from the Federal Reserve, the U.S. Census Bureau, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and the Congressional Budget Office. And I want to be super clear right up front. Our goal here is not to assign individual blame to anyone. We just want to neutrally and systematically unpack the architecture of poverty. We're talking about how inflation, rising living costs, and debt have fundamentally rewired the American economy. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, living in survival mode. We hear economists debate all the time about whether the U.S. is in a K-shaped economic recovery. Well, on the ground, what that actually means is lower to moderate income households are feeling unrelenting financial stress, while the higher income brackets remain, frankly, pretty insulated. Take a look at ALICE families. That stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, but Employed. So these are working people. Yet, according to researchers, nearly 90% of them experience income fluctuations of at least 10% in any given 6-month period. When your income swings that dramatically, you just can't budget. You're forced into this permanent state of crisis management, which makes it mathematically impossible to plan for any kind of long-term upward mobility.
Section 2, when prices outpace paychecks. Right after World War II, the U.S. experienced what economists like to call the Great Compression. It was this incredible period of shared prosperity, where incomes grew pretty much across the board. But since 1980, we've entered the Great Divergence. Actually, scratch that. It's more like a massive disconnect. Because since that year, home prices have skyrocketed by an unbelievable 551%, while median household incomes have grown by only 373%. And this brilliantly illustrates the problem. If household incomes had just kept pace with housing costs over these last 4 decades, the median American household would be earning over $115,000 today. Instead, they're earning tens of thousands of dollars less, which fundamentally locks millions of people out of the absolute biggest engine for American wealth creation, which is homeownership.
And the squeeze is only tightening. When we look at data from USA Facts spanning May 2025 to May 2026, it reveals a pretty harsh mathematical reality. While nominal wages, meaning the actual dollars showing up in people's paychecks, went up by a very respectable 3.7%, inflation was running at 4.2%. So despite getting a raise on paper, the typical worker's real purchasing power actually shrank. Every single dollar literally buys just a little bit less at the grocery store, at the gas pump, and at the pharmacy. Which brings us to this single staggering number from an incredibly comprehensive Rand Corporation study: $42,000. That is exactly how much less a typical, full-time, prime-age worker earns today than they would have if income inequality hadn't accelerated over the last 40 years. This isn't just some abstract academic concept. Working-class individuals across all demographics, and especially in rural areas, have lost out on trillions of dollars in wealth simply because economic growth has increasingly bypassed the wage earner and flowed straight to the top. Section 3, the invisible credit trap. So the crucial point is, when this massive income-to-cost squeeze completely eliminates any margin for error in a household budget, families are pushed right to the brink. According to the Federal Reserve's 2025 survey, 37% of adults cannot cover a hypothetical $400 emergency expense using cash or an equivalent. I mean, really think about that for a second. A single brake job on your car, a minor medical bill, or just a temporary loss of shift hours is a catastrophic financial event for nearly 4 in 10 Americans. Now, how the financial system responds to that fragility is exactly where the trap is set. Credit scores essentially act as the institutional gatekeepers of our entire economy. So while 76% of adults have prime credit, nearly 24% have subprime scores below 660. But if you look closely at low-income census tracts, it gets so much worse. Over 53% of people there have subprime credit, and another 15.7% are completely credit invisible, as in they don't even exist in the eyes of the traditional financial system. And here is exactly how that institutional gatekeeping creates a vicious cycle. Step 1, that unexpected expense hits. Step 2, because they have no traditional credit, they can't get a standard bank loan or even a low-interest credit card. So step 3, they're forced into the alternative financial system. We're talking payday loans, title loans, or predatory financing just to keep the lights on. Which leads to step 4, they enter a brutal cycle of debt. Economists call this the poverty premium. It is the tragic paradox of our modern economy. The people with the absolutely least amount of income are charged the highest possible costs just to survive. Section 4, the broken mobility ladder. These daily financial traps, they don't just cause short-term pain, they permanently stall the American dream of generational progress. And that brings us to the concept of upward relative intergenerational mobility. Basically, in a perfectly fluid society, a child's economic destiny should be totally untethered from their parents' bank account. But labor economists have identified this thing called the Great Gatsby curve. It proves mathematically that across the globe, high income inequality is directly correlated with low social mobility. And the United States, unfortunately, sits very high up on that curve.
But does where you live actually determine how high you can climb? Well, the data from the Census Bureau is pretty compelling. A child raised in poverty in Boulder, Colorado can expect to reach the 47th income percentile as an adult. But that exact same child born into the exact same poverty, but growing up in Cincinnati, Ohio, will only reach the 38th percentile. So local geography, the quality of public schools, access to healthcare, and community social capital literally dictate economic destiny.
Section 5, the path to long-term wealth.
But listen, we aren't just here to admire the problem today. While the architecture of poverty is deeply structural, there are proven, data-backed levers for creating real financial stability and breaking this cycle. First up is asset accumulation. Because economic growth disproportionately benefits capital over labor, true stability requires shifting from merely earning wages to actually owning assets. That could be home equity, retirement accounts, or even investing in new skills training. Second is credit building. Establishing a traditional credit profile is absolutely crucial. It's really the only way to escape the exorbitant cost of that poverty premium we talked about earlier. And third, emergency liquidity. Bridging the gap requires aggressively prioritizing a financial buffer well beyond that fragile $400 benchmark just to protect yourself against life's inevitable shocks.
We've seen the data today. The structural traps of poverty are real, they are institutional, and they affect millions of working Americans every single day. So the question we really have to ask ourselves now is this: will we continue to accept an economy of divergence, or will we build a new architecture of opportunity?